Some seem to attract the unexplained, and few stories illustrate that better than the strange experiences of Harrison Bailey. He was an ordinary man living in an extraordinary time, but what happened to him went beyond history, beyond what most people will ever witness in a lifetime. Harrison E. Bailey was a young, energetic 24-year-old steel mill worker from Gary, Indiana. In an era marked by racial division and social upheaval, Bailey was known as an optimistic and easygoing man. He was also something of an entrepreneur. Alongside his regular job, he earned extra income by rolling a large green advertising wheel across the country, which he had painted, promoting businesses wherever he traveled. On September 23, 1951, Bailey set out on one of his most ambitious journeys yet. His destination was St. Louis, Missouri, where he hoped to meet Bill Veeck, the owner of the St. Louis Browns baseball team. As always, his advertising wheel rolled beside him as he made his way down the road. Several miles from Orland Park, Illinois, Bailey suddenly felt a painful cramping and burning sensation on the back of his neck. It felt as though a powerful gust of wind were striking him from behind. Turning around, he saw something unusual in the distance. Suspended in the air was what appeared to be a gray whirlwind. It was wider at the top than at the bottom, and unlike any dust devil or whirlwind Bailey had ever seen. As he continued walking away from it, the pain in his neck gradually subsided. Pressed for time and accustomed to strange sights on his travels, Bailey chose not to investigate. He continued forward and entered a wooded area. According to the account, Bailey later recalled under hypnosis what happened next brought him to an immediate stop. Ahead of him, resting against a fallen log, was a bizarre creature unlike anything he had ever seen. It lay on its back before suddenly rolling its eyes sideways, standing upright, and approached him. Then Bailey realized it wasn't alone. Surrounding him were numerous small frog-like beings standing roughly 1.5 feet tall. Their bodies were light brown and marked with darker brown stripes. They possessed 3 fingers, 3 toes, and large eyes that seemed to wrap partially around the sides of their heads. Within moments, nearly a dozen of the creatures had gathered around him. The beings moved by hopping and emitted sounds barely compared to the quacking of ducks. Accompanying them were numerous black beetle-like creatures with hard shells that scurried around the area. What struck Bailey most was that the frog-like beings appeared to be communicating with one another. They seemed excited. Some hopped forward and touched him repeatedly, reaching as high as his waist. The contact was unsettling. Bailey later stated that every time one of the creatures touched him, it produced an unpleasant sensation. Meanwhile, the beings continued chattering amongst themselves while surrounding him on all sides. Trying to keep control of his heavy advertising wheel, Bailey used his free hand to fend them off as he pushed forward. Eventually, he spotted an opening in the crowd and seized the opportunity. He ran. After putting considerable distance between himself and the creatures, Bailey stopped and brushed off his clothing, worried that one of them might still be clinging to him. That was when things became even stranger. He began to feel an overwhelming heaviness throughout his body. His sense of time became confused and fragmented. Bailey later claimed that several hours seemed to have passed, yet he was still in the same stretch of forest. Eventually, he came upon a marshland dotted with small ponds. In one of those ponds sat an object unlike anything he had ever encountered. By his estimate, it was roughly the size of a Greyhound bus. Its metallic silver surface reflected the fading daylight as Bailey watched. Then, before his eyes, a door slid open. Inside stood two helmeted figures staring directly at him. Bailey didn't know what he was looking at. In 1951, the term UFO had only recently entered the public consciousness. Reports of flying saucers had spread across newspapers after the Roswell incident just a few years earlier. But Bailey wasn't particularly interested in speculation. Looking at the strange silver craft before him, his first thought wasn't extraterrestrials. It might have been a secret military project. It might have been a Russian aircraft. After all, the Korean War was raging overseas, and tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union were growing by the day. Whatever it was, Bailey wanted no part of it. But as he stood there staring at the object, the burning sensation on the back of his neck returned. This time, it was far worse. His entire body began to vibrate. The feeling was so intense that Bailey suddenly thought back to the strange gray whirlwind he had encountered earlier that day. For the first time, he felt certain that the two phenomena were connected. Years later, during hypnosis sessions conducted by Dr. Bill McCall, investigators attempted to explore the missing hours surrounding this very moment. In Bailey's conscious memory, the sequence was simple. He approached the strange craft, experienced the paralysis-like sensation, exchanged a few words with its occupants, and then continued on his journey. Under hypnosis, however, Bailey recalled something very different. According to that account, he never willingly entered the craft. He claimed that he became overwhelmingly tired to the point where staying awake felt like nearly impossible. Looking back, Bailey speculated that the frog-like creatures that had repeatedly touched him earlier may have had something to do with the sudden fatigue, though he admitted he couldn't be certain. What he did remember was a growing sensation of drowsiness, then darkness. According to the hypnotic recollection, the only way he could have entered the craft was if he had already fallen asleep. The next thing he remembered was waking up inside. Bailey described finding himself within a strange room occupied by the helmeted figures. Through their green visors, he could just barely make out their faces. The features were, in his words, simply bizarre. That's what he left us with. He recalled the being slowly moving his head from side to side as though examining him. Exhausted and frightened, Bailey began closing his eyes, hoping the experience would end as quickly as possible. Then the memory faded. The next clear recollection he had was of being outside the craft once again, and that is where his conscious memory resumes. One of the helmeted figures spoke.
"Where are you from?"
The question caught Bailey off guard. Still feeling the strange vibrations coursing through his body, he answered,
"Gary, Indiana." "Where are you going?" "St. Louis, Missouri."
To Bailey, the conversation itself was almost absurd. Whether these were Russian spies, military personnel, or something far stranger, he wasn't interested in becoming involved. He still had many miles to travel before reaching Joliet, and his only concern was getting back on the road. Gradually, the paralysis-like sensation began to ease. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Bailey resumed his journey. But before leaving completely, he glanced back one final time. What he saw convinced him that this was no ordinary aircraft. Years later, Bailey would struggle to fully describe what happened next. The details seemed fragmented, as though parts of the experience remained just beyond his reach. As he continued walking, the heaviness returned. This time, it was accompanied by nausea. The weather seemed different. The light seemed different. Most disturbing of all, time itself felt wrong. Hours appeared to pass far more quickly than they should have. By the time Bailey finally reached the area near Joliet, he was exhausted, disoriented, and increasingly concerned about how much time he had somehow lost. Fortunately, a station master took pity on the weary traveler and allowed him to stay the night at a nearby inn. For Bailey, the ordeal seemed over. In reality, it was only beginning.